Alright, this is going to be Chapter 4, Learning Styles. And in this section we're going to talk about learning and the senses, types of cognitive learning, experiential learning styles, addressing various learning styles, assessing student learning styles, assessing the educator's learning style, caution on learning style assessments, using learning styles to enhance teaching, and then multiple intelligences. So, learning and the senses. The type and number of senses involved in learning experiences determines how an individual learns and what they'll retain. So, very simply, we can have students that use all of their senses or some of their senses or have a preference of a sense. When sensory stimulation involves more than one sense, learners retain information better. Saying something aloud for writing improves retention by 70%. So if they actually write it down, it increases their retention on this. It is good to supplement instructional with visual and auditory aids, such as slides or audio tapes. Now, one of the things that we need to look at here is we have different types of learners, this is a section we're going to talk about this. We should probably have more tools so that we reach more of the students in their own native learning style, is the point of this entire thing. And understanding those learning styles will help us develop tools in our normal teaching that'll kind of improve on our students' retention, which will improve test scores, improve overall student performance. So what is a learning style? Learning styles involve the use of a schema. A schema is a diagram representation, and an example of this would be an algorithm or a protocol, if you will. The algorithm pretty much starts at one spot and works its way down. Then they do this, then they do this, and so on. So it clearly outlines what's going to happen, and that's how students the various learning styles, if they understand their learning style, it'll be the same as a schema, or it'll be the same as this algorithm. If they utilize the algorithm that is taught to them, example of this, if you teach them how to become an auditory learner and they are an auditory learner, then they'll retain more because that's their preferred method. Types of cognitive learning styles. We have auditory learners, visual learners, kinesthetic learners, analytic learners, global learners, social learners, and then independent learners. Auditory learners, and this is very simple, they learn by hearing things. So, example of this, if they record lectures and then listen to them again over their headsets, you can pretty much bet that that person is an auditory learner. A person who learns best by hearing are considered auditory learners. Auditory learners must hear the instructions and any noise or tones produced by the equipment. You may actually see auditory learners as well turn up the monitor to where they can hear the heart rate. They may incline to talk their way through the EKG strips, and that's just to reinforce what's going on in their head. Visual learners. Individuals who need to see what they're learning are considered visual learners. Now, areas that will help visual learners are things like handouts, videotapes, or videos, overheads, radiographs, or x-rays. Whenever they speak in terms like seeing you around, try to picture this. They're very visual as far as the mind's eye even goes. The point of this is please ensure that the visual aids are correct. If they see something, it'll reinforce a bad habit, or it'll reinforce something that's not true. So be sure your visual aids are correct. Kinesthetic learners. A person learns with their bodies are considered kinesthetic learners. A kinesthetic learner may take things apart to see how they work, or use their hands for tactile stimulation. Me saying catch you around, they say things like catch you around or let's get going, things like that. Ideas for writing formulas whenever you get to that portion. Let's say you're teaching them how to do math for meds or pharmacology math. Having them write the formulas out with their finger in the air is a good technique for a kinesthetic learner. When skills are taught, a kinesthetic learner will benefit from having the technique demonstrated for him or her. So if they see it once, there's a good chance that they're going to be able to reproduce it. An analytic learner. People who are logical thinkers process information logically, sequentially, and in small parts that build toward a whole. These individuals are considered analytical learners and are often described as left brain. They work very comfortably by following a protocol for an algorithm. The forest for the trees comes to mind whenever we talk about analytic learners. They'll look at every tree in the forest before they feel for certain to conclude that it is a forest. Using a guest instructor to an analytic learner may be difficult. Be sure there is consistency. So if you pick a guest lecturer, be sure that their style is similar to yours. So if they've gotten accustomed to your delivery fashion, this will help. A continued consistency will help the analytic learner to flourish in this environment if you use guest lecturers. Be sure that you supply the guest instructor with objectives as well as an awareness of any controversial or potential problematic content areas. At the point that you know what type of learners that you have in your classroom, if you know there's going to be a controversy over a specific item before the item is even brought up, and you have a guest lecturer in for that day, it might be good to make them aware of that. Global learners. People who think in terms of the big picture and who need to see the whole picture before the parts are considered global learners. These learners tend to be creative, artistic, imaginative, emotional, and intuitive. They may be less likely to follow a protocol, preferring to treat patients based on their outcome rather than on a process. When teaching a global learner, it's important for the educator to start with an overview of the lesson. So, giving them a brief overview of what's actually going to be in this chapter, and then explaining each of one of those points, and then kind of giving a summary will reinforce it for a person that's a global learner. Use of scenarios rather than simple practice of an isolated skill. The use of algorithms or protocol that students can follow. Proper balance between procedures and the desired result. All of these help the global learner. Having students put skills in context by relating activities to patient assessment findings. So have them find something. Why is that important? And talking about it a little bit and letting that information kind of soak in, or let them reflect on it, is a good way to keep a global learner attentive and educate a global learner. Social learners. People who process information best when engaged in multiple tasks in busy environments with other learners are considered social learners. For social learners, background noise, music, radio is not distracting, and it can even be helpful. Social media can be used also to facilitate their learning. Use of discussion boards, scenario reviews on the actual social media themselves. Be sure we don't aggravate any HIPAA law when doing so, but making up scenarios, putting out patient care scenarios and allow them to go through it as a group really helps the social learner to put things in their head appropriately. Independent learners. Individuals who prefer to process information independently, isolated from other learners, are considered independent learners. These learners will seek out quiet, undisturbed study environments. They react well to reading assignments, written exams, and reports. When you place students into groups, you got to be careful who's actually in the group. You could have a whole group of independent learners, which they're going to do great by reading something quietly and then, doing a report over it. But what you want to make in that group is you want to not only put some independent learners, but also kinesthetic learners, maybe some auditory learners, so that between the group of them, it makes a dynamic of its own. So from that group, they have little learning pods, if you will. And those learning pods, even for the independent learner, because most of the time peer pressure will be involved with this. So as the rest of the group starts working out their own issues and working out the problem, then generally the independent learners will chime in and assist with this. Experiential learning styles. Whenever we look at experiential learning styles, we have convergers, divergers, assimilators, and accommodators. And all of these are kind of good to know, especially whenever we're trying to teach someone a psychomotor skill. So this is an overview of this type of learning style. So we have assimilators, convergers, accommodators, and then divergers. Now, this is Kolb's learning style, and two of these approaches, whenever he came up with this, were theorized to help towards grasping an experience, and that was the concrete experience part, and then the abstract thinking. Now, both of these, and an example of this, I had an idea, and this is a light bulb. I had an idea, and I thought about this idea, but until I experience this, or until I do this, it's not going to be concrete in my head. The two other approaches were towards transforming an experience into an appropriate one. Reflective observation, which would be watching someone else either do it correctly or make mistakes. And then active experimentation, which would be actually doing it yourself. So all of these should be applied to anything that you're teaching. And I'll give some examples of this as we go on. Let's go ahead and define the sections here: accommodating, diverging, converging, and assimilating. And then we're going to come back to this learning style. Convergers. The converger has dominant abilities in abstract conceptualization and active experimentation. A converger favors the practical application of an idea. When teaching convergers, they will strive to find the reason of why a new concept or skill matters before they will try something new. So, very simply, this is why we're doing it. Allow the lecture part of it to get everyone kind of to soak the idea into their head, if you will, and then allow the convergers to get together. Oh, I see why we do it like that. Let them assimilate that information, and then once they've assimilated it, let them kind of retrospectively think about it, and then apply their new skill. A diverger. The diverger brings together concrete experimentation and reflective observation. Divergers are reflective and like to think through their experiences, so they'll mull it over in their head a bit. They are skilled observers who would prefer to watch something done first before they have an experience. Very easy to teach divergers as you show them how to do it right the first time, and very simply they'll do it time and time and again. Assimilators. The combination of abstract conceptualization and reflective observation defines an assimilator. Assimilators like to understand the theory before they put something into practice, or they assimilate it. Assimilators tend to believe without understanding a theory they cannot treat a patient. So an example of this: why am I giving this medicine? If I don't understand why I'm giving it, then I'm probably not going to do it. And the same way with the procedure: why am I doing it this way? So these people are probably going to give you the most whys, but if you tell them the why, very simply it will load into their head quite well. Accommodators. Accommodators are the doers and often first to volunteer for a new experience, even if they haven't got the skill down. Accommodators will often jump into new experience even if they have not learned the new concept, just to try it out and have the experience. So, back to the learning styles. If you can incorporate all of these learning styles into a delivery of something, it doesn't matter what type of learner you are, you'll get it. So, very simply, first of all, the thinking part of it, and then walking everybody through it. Now, if you are a converger, after thinking about it and doing it, you can probably do it. But the people that can't do it may need to repeat this a couple of times to get the actual experience. And then from the experience, what they can do is they have a foundation to work upon. The divergers get as much from this as the next person, because they're actually seeing it done first and seeing what mistakes someone else would have made. Whereas the assimilators they can pretty much think about it and watch it, and then they'll try to perform it. And these guys here these guys want to get the experience anyway. Oh, let's just do it. And then from there, they can actually work through it. Now, in addition to these learning styles, you can also be an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner, a combination learner that prefers two methods. Now, on the blackboard, I'm going to assign some work with this chapter. One of the things I'm going to assign for this chapter is to figure out what type of learner you are. So there will be a Kolb assessment and then a learning styles assessment that you'll have to go to a web page and fill it out, but it'll give you a ballpark guesstimate of what type of learner you are. Addressing various learning styles. Learning styles inventory, sensory input, context, experience, and environment all kind of fall into this. An educator may have to simultaneously reach learners who are visual, analytical, independent, as well as those who are kinesthetic, global, and social, all simultaneously with your delivery. The more tools you have for each learning type, the better educator you'll become, very simply. If you can deliver it in all forms and fashions simultaneously, that's even better. Assessing student learning styles. There are learning styles inventory, which we're going to kind of talk about here, and there's the Myers Briggs type indicator, which the book talks about. Learning styles inventory, and this is the Kolb assessment, and you all will get to go through one of these. It'll be a page on there attached with a hyperlink to a Kolb learning style inventory. The concepts of determining an individual's learning style was pioneered by Kolb. By adding together scores from various learning cycles for types of learners, they identify a converger, a diverger, an assimilator, or an accommodator. This inventory gives the learner more information about how you actually like to learn. A Meyer-Briggs type indicator. The Meyer-Briggs type indicator is designed to determine a person's personality type. The MBTI determines preferences on 4 dichotomies: extroversion, introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. Now, extroversion and introversion describes people whether they prefer to focus their attention and get their energy from the outer world of people and activity, or their inner world of ideas and experiences. Introversion is going to be inner world, extroversion is going to be outer influences. Sensing, intuition. And this is going to be information focused on what's real or actual, or on patterns and meanings of data. So, what are you sensing versus what's your actual gut feeling on this? And thinking versus feeling describes how people prefer to make decisions based on logical analysis or guided by concerns for their impact on others. So, logical analysis would be thinking. The feeling person is how do I make this other person feel about this? Judging and perceiving describes how people prefer to deal with the outer world in a planned, orderly way or in a flexible, spontaneous way. Combinations of these preferences result in 16 personality types. They are represented by a 4-letter acronym. An example of this would be an INTJ. Now, you can actually also do free Meyer-Briggs type indicators, and they're kind of fun sometimes. If you would like to see what your student's personality is, if they're really honest with the exam, very simply, you can kind of get a little bit of insight on your students. I'll see if I can put one of these on the blackboard as well. Meyer-Briggs type indicator. Assessing the educational learning styles. Educators tend to teach the way they like to learn. This increases the risk of an educator focusing on a particular method of instruction. Because of diversity in the classroom, it is important for educators to know their own learning styles and make strong efforts to reach out to learners who use different styles. So very simply, if I'm primarily a kinesthetic learner, then I'm going to prefer to teach in kinesthetic style. But if I understand what type of learner I am and I make above and beyond the efforts to try to not only teach in that aspect of it, but to teach in other aspects as well, then I will be more of a universal instructor or a well-rounded instructor. Caution on learning styles assessment. Caution must be taken in labeling a student with a particular learning style. The job of the educator should be to help the student understand how they learn and strategies to help them learn. Educators should try to reach as many styles as humanly possible. The biggest impact on learning styles assessment may be helping students foster awareness of their learning process. And very simply, if you can tell a student how they learn and what there might be some areas to polish up on the way that they learn, this is going to be very useful information. Using learning styles to enhance teaching. Very simply, variety is the spice of life. Reaching out to learners with varying learning styles is an achievable goal when the educator has a solid understanding of the learning styles. The use of diversity and instructional methods ensure that each student receives a small portion of the lesson through his or her own preferred method of learning. This allows you to reach the group as a whole a lot better. So instead of the students adjusting to you, you should be the one adjusting to the students. Multiple intelligences. Gardner of Harvard University has proposed that individuals have varying degrees of intelligence, and this is absolutely correct. Each individual person has strengths of each intelligence. Now, an example of this, a person could play beautifully on the piano, but may struggle in mathematics. Other individuals may be adept in understanding him or herself, but they cannot understand others. So, very simply, in one area, and this is the theory by this Gardner in Harvard University, that we already have multiple intelligences. So we should look to our strong points, harbor those strong points, and use those to where we can branch out in other areas. This is a summary of this chapter. Each learner brings to the classroom a preference of the way that he or she perceives, receives, and processes information or learns. To maximize learning, the educator must be aware of these differences. Learning styles have been described in the terms of sensory perception and social interaction. New theories, such as multiple intelligences, are expanding the view of learning styles and challenging educators everywhere. If you have any questions over the subject content in this chapter, feel free to give me a call. My name is Roy Smith. I can be reached at smithr@imsa.net or 405-219-7613. Thank you.